And I do hope you will call this half hour. We have a guest in the studio I think you're going to be interested to hear from, and I bet you're going to have some questions for. Each week I see just literally tons of reports about lab discoveries that may lead to a breakthrough in cancer treatment. And, occasionally I cover a few of those. Discovering in the lab, though, or positive results in mice is great, but that still means you're years and years and sometimes over $1 billion away from what really matters, and that is a treatment that is going to help you get through cancer. And when all of that is coming about, it's because of a clinical trial. And that is our focus this half hour. By the time a drug has reached clinical trials, there's good evidence that it's safe, right? Well, now those trials are designed to learn just how can it best be used and how much of a difference does it really make. You might not know that doctors right here in Fort Wayne are involved in these clinical trials, and that's good news if you have someone who you love who has cancer. So I want you to meet Dr. Sunil Babu. He is an oncologist and the director of the Inventa Center for Cancer Research, a division of the Fort Wayne Oncology and Hematology practice. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Lee.
You bet. Why a separate division in your practice just for research?
So essentially, Fort Wayne Medical Oncology has been doing clinical research since 1992. We used to participate in a lot of National Cancer Institute-sponsored clinical trials through what we call as alliance groups. They're not very intense to participate. The requirements are not great. But, in the last 2 decades, like you alluded to, there have been tremendous developments. And, these days, we are getting new FDA-approved drugs in blood and cancer treatment pretty much every week. It's very difficult to keep up even. So a couple of decades ago, when the scientific information started exploding and the pharmaceutical industry started focusing on development of new cancer drugs, especially focusing on, targeted drugs and immunotherapy type of drugs, which you might be familiar with. We realized that Fort Wayne does not have, the patients in Fort Wayne do not have access to this early stage trials. That is where, all these experimental drugs are being tried. So we decided in 2012 to start participating in pharma trials. Then we found that, we need a good team in place to engage with the partners. Because it's much more intense than the trials which we were previously participating in. So we developed the team, and in 2016, we decided to kind of become a separate division so that we can focus more on identifying the right partners and making sure it happens right.
So are clinical trials a last resort for a patient? Is that something you use only when everything else has failed?
I would say, decades ago, that might have been the case. But with the pace of scientific development and, these days, the drugs are mostly designed in a lab. They are designed in the sense, it's not coming from a plant or, just some chemical who someone is identifying. A lot of them are designed, and you know exactly what effect it is going to have as it engages with the cells. But you don't know all the effects because there are, things which we don't know. So, a drug, when it's developed, it starts off with cell lines, then it moves to animal research, and then it comes into first-in-human studies. Now, we participate in first-in-human studies to phase 3, which are the later stages of clinical studies. I believe we are the only entity in Fort Wayne which does, first-in-human studies. So, first-in-human studies are generally designed to identify the dose of the drug, and because these days these drugs are kind of engineered, we know which cancers they might work. But, that is where a lot of the drugs can fail because we don't know the full effects in a human being because they have been studied only in cell lines and animal models. But as we get to the later trials, especially phase 2 and phase 3, we have some evidence that the drug is fairly safe and they are active in certain types of cancer. So that is being studied in later lines of treatment. So Fort Wayne Medical Oncology's division Inventa, we participate in first in human phase 1 all the way to phase 3. So we're proud to provide all opportunities to our community.
So do you invite those patients to participate as, well, let me back up a second. So when I'm on a clinical trial, am I a guinea pig? I mean, you're experimenting, but you're also treating my cancer at the same time. It's not that I'm going to get a placebo, no treatment, or the clinical trial, right?
That's a very good question. So, that's one of the commonest questions I hear. Am I just going to get a sugar pill? I have this cancer, and you're talking about a clinical trial. In cancer trials, every patient will get the standard of care. What they were expected to get based on guidelines, they will get that treatment. The clinical trial medication will be in addition to the standard of care. And if it is a phase 3 study, then it can be 50-50 chance that you will get the clinical trial drug, and the other group will get some kind of a placebo drug. And these studies are double-blinded in the sense, like the Fort Wayne team has no idea who is getting the real drug or the placebo. The idea is to remove bias, any kind of bias which the carer might have. If they were aware what the patient is getting. Now, when we are talking about phase 1 study, first in human, we know that everyone is getting the molecule that we are studying. So that's the difference.
So as a patient, does this mean more visits, more lab tests, more expense for me?
Another very valuable question. So, pharmaceutical trials are designed to essentially make it less problematic for the patients and and beneficial. So there is a little more intensity when you participate in clinical trial, but in some ways, when you are a cancer patient and you're on some kind of chronic treatment, you want good oversight. Mm-hmm. It's very important because these are a lot of the medications can have untoward side effects, even the approved drugs. So having that oversight, not just from your oncologist, but it's a whole team. It's a team approach. When you're participating in a clinical trial, there are a lot of eyes on you. So the chance of missing something, that is not going well, is minimal. So I think participating in a clinical trial is the greatest opportunity a cancer patient might have. And if you actually look at the available guidelines, all of us in the U.S., we generally use guidelines provided by National Comprehensive Cancer Care Network, mm-hmm. NCCN, otherwise called NCCN. In fact, all the insurances, Medicare included, they need us to use these guidelines. So if you look at the guideline, the interesting part is, clinical trial is always on the list as first line, second line. The reason is, unfortunately, in 2022, most of the cancers that have spread, obviously there are curable type of cancers with surgery and, mm-hmm. Sometimes with intense chemotherapy and other treatments. But most of the cancers, remain kind of elusive. We can't cure them, right? And anything less than cure is inadequate treatment. That's the way I look at it. That's why I'm interested in clinical trials. And if you look at, how entities like Medicare support clinical research, especially in cancer, they incentivize entities which are encouraging clinical trials because they want to make sure that the future dollars that are spent on healthcare is used wisely in treatments that can cure patients. Because that is, if you can cure a cancer with few treatments instead of keeping a patient on a chronic treatment for years, that saves the system so much money, and it's any day better for the community and the patient.
Sure, saves all of us money. Yeah. Exactly right. So we're going to talk about the future of cancer care. Pretty optimistic times, and you told me that we're thinking now not about treatment but more about cure. Actually, curing is looking more hopeful than ever. We're going to get to that, and Dr. Babu is here in our studio, ready to take your calls at 447-1190, 800-333-1190, or you can text your question to 46862, and I will get that to Dr. Sunil Babu, oncologist and the director of the Inventa Center for Cancer Research at Fort Wayne Oncology and Hematology, when we come back on the HealthCall Live Radio Hour on WOWO. And we are back to our conversation about cancer clinical trials, cancer treatment in general, with oncologist Dr. Sunil Babu from Fort Wayne Medical Oncology and Hematology. He is also the director of the Inventa Center for Cancer Research at Fort Wayne Medical Oncology. We were talking during the break here about what's different in how cancer is being approached these days. We're thinking a lot more about a cure than just managing the disease now, right?
Definitely. I think, 10 years ago, if you had asked me about, are we going to cure cancer, especially the common ones, I would have said, it's not looking very promising. But then the whole era of immunotherapy came along. I would say the first drug got approved in 2008 for melanoma. Before that, melanoma treatments, there were a couple of old type immunotherapy type of options which were pretty intense on the patient and the outcomes were not great. And then the so-called immunotherapy agents, which a lot of folks are aware of, came along, where we are essentially targeting the patient's immune system to start recognizing these bad cells, which are the cancer cells. Normally, our immune systems are constantly recognizing these abnormal cells, which are made constantly in our body as the cells divide, but and they are destroyed. But when the immune system starts weakening, or these cells have abilities to escape the immune system, then they'll survive, they thrive, they attain new abilities, they start traveling, going to neighborhoods they should not be going. So that's what cancer is. So what if we could reprogram that patient's immune system using medications so that they start recognizing these cells again and clear it? That'll be the most phenomenal thing to do. There are no real chemicals and things like that. So, that is what the crux of immunotherapy is. And these drugs have dramatically changed outcomes in many cancers. I would say, 70% of cancer patients in 2022 are receiving some form of immunotherapy containing treatments. But, they also have side effects, because when you activate the immune system, it may start attacking your normal cells also, which triggers some of the unique side effects. So, the research currently is focused on developing more unique immunotherapy techniques, which can, just attack the cancer cell and leave the normal cells alone. For example, one of the trials which we are exploring through our partner at UCLA. We are one of the 16 network partners for UCLA Cancer Center through this network called Translational Research in Oncology, or TRIO. So one of the trials is, with a company which essentially identifies what we call as neoantigens. So neoantigens are cancer proteins that are shown only on the cancer cell. Because you have to realize that the cancer cell is a rogue normal cell. So it has all of the regular proteins, but sometimes because of the mutations, the DNA abnormalities that happen in a cancer cell, it starts producing new proteins which are unique to the cancer cell. So if we are able to go after that unique protein, then we don't have to hit the normal cell. So
it's a rifle shot,
yes,
a laser shot
yes,
at that tumor. So we've got a call I want to get you to, Dr. Babu. What is the success rate in clinical trials? So let's find out about that. What does success in a clinical trial mean?
Sure. So, when we talk about clinical trials, like I mentioned earlier, there are trials ranging from preclinical studies to phase 3 studies. But if we took, all types of clinical trials in developing a drug, what percentage of these trials will actually translate to a positive outcome, that is an FDA approval for the drug? It's in the range of, in medical oncology, it's higher actually. It's about 14%.
Are there drugs that are in use now that you helped research and develop?
Definitely. So that, those are the proud moments, right? We have been doing pharmaceutical trials as well as the National Cancer Institute sponsored trials for decades now. Now we were talking, about immunotherapy. So it is possible that you have heard of this drug called Opdivo or nivolumab, which is it is advertised on TV all the time. So, I remember in 2013, before the drug was approved in lung cancer, which was in 2015. So in that time period, we were able to participate in a trial with Opdivo, and actually the trial, allowed patients who have failed all types of treatment to be part of the trial, and it was kind of an easy trial to participate in. And we actually enrolled 23 patients, and we have patients who are alive right now because they had that opportunity.
So that is there's a golden example of why having you in the community doing the research you're doing is a benefit to all of us, right? Because I'm not going to get access to that drug as early if it wasn't for that clinical research. Another area of growth is not only trying to kill the cancer, get rid of it, but also detect it sooner. That's so important. What's happening there?
I'm glad that you asked, because there are tremendous developments in that area also. The techniques, the scientific techniques, the lab techniques have improved, where we are able to detect strands of abnormal DNA in the blood by just collecting a blood sample from a person. So there are certain signatures for cancers which are similar in different individuals with the same cancer. They may have signatures which are similar, and then there are unique signatures for that individual with the cancer also. So, there are companies trying to develop assays, cancer detection tests for especially the common cancers, looking for these strands of abnormal DNA in an individual's blood. So, we are participating in a clinical study where it's called Thrive, where, individuals above the age of 50, with or without cancer, new patients with cancer, we are collecting their samples so that we can actually identify the strands. And we also have a control group where, you don't have to have cancer, but you donate that vial of blood in helping develop this test. I believe in about 3 to 5 years, when you go to your family doctor for your annual checkup, some kind of this testing will be getting incorporated. There is already data that these tests can identify a lot of cancers. Obviously, the old tests are not going to go away immediately. Mammogram, Pap smear, PSA testing, all that might continue for a while. But I have a feeling in about 10 years, a lot of these tests are going to disappear, and it'll all be a blood test.
That's exciting. I always like to ask guys like you, how do you live differently? Based on everything you've seen and all those years of research, are there things that you do differently to reduce your risk of cancer? I do. I'm, aware of the data, but again, just being a human being, I'm not always on the spot. But it is important that we be aware, at least, right? One of the straightforward examples is smoking, right? We have known about the risk of smoking for decades now, but still, it is a popular activity in our community, unfortunately. Yeah, huge problem. Yeah. So any supplements or diet changes you've made? Because everybody is talking about eating differently and trying different things to try and reduce that inflammation or the cancer risk. Any of those in your life?
Definitely. I think, I have changed a lot more to, I eat more vegetables compared to like 10 years ago, trying to cut down on sugar. And a lot of the data, the dietary data that is available out there, but you have habits which you've created over decades. So it has to be a conscious effort. And, it's okay if you fail here and there, but you need to keep striving. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to have you back. We'll talk more in detail about immunotherapy somewhere down the road. I find that fascinating, being able to train your body to spot, identify, and then kill that cancer cell. That sounds like there's lots of progress there. We've got to run. We will see you next week right here on the HealthCall Live Radio Hour on WOWO.